big mysteries of neuroscience is how our brains store and retrieve information.
Right.
The traditional model focuses on neurons and synapses.
Yeah.
But some researchers believe it's far more complex than that.
Okay.
Like Dr. Karen Johnson, whose work we looked at.
Yeah.
She proposes that biophotons,
Biophotons?
those tiny bursts of light emitted by cells, might play a key role.
So light in the brain.
Yeah.
I thought it was all about electrical signals. How would that even work?
It's a really fascinating idea.
Yeah.
Dr. Johnson suggests that these biophotons emitted by neurons could interact with water molecules in the brain to create a kind of quantum information field.
Okay, so instead of like our memories being files on a computer,
Right.
they're more like holograms,
Kind of, yeah.
patterns of light encoded in this quantum field.
That's the idea.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is.
So it could explain like why certain smells or sounds trigger vivid memories from our past.
Right.
It's not just that those sensory inputs are activating specific neurons.
Yeah.
They might be activating these entire patterns
Exactly.
within this quantum information field.
Bringing back like a whole cluster of associated experiences.
They're a whole story.
Yeah, like a whole network of interconnected memories.
Okay. But if this quantum field is where memories are stored, wouldn't that imply some sort of like universal memory bank?
That's a great question.
I mean, how would that even work?
Right.
And where would it be located?
Yeah, it gets to the heart of what makes this theory so challenging and so intriguing.
Yeah.
It suggests that memory might not be localized only within our individual brains, but that there could be this deeper level of interconnectedness, a shared field of information that we're all tapping into.
Okay, now we're getting into some serious metaphysical territory.
Yeah.
But let's try to stick with the science for a moment.
Okay.
Are there any experiments that could actually test this idea of a quantum memory field?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There are a few promising avenues of research.
Okay.
For example, scientists are investigating whether biophoton emissions from the brain change during memory recall.
Okay.
They're also looking at whether stimulating specific brain regions with weak electromagnetic fields can trigger specific memories, essentially bypassing the usual neural pathways.
So like hacking into the quantum field.
Kinda?
Imagine being able to access lost memories.
It's a wild thought.
Or even implant new ones just by manipulating these fields.
It's like science fiction.
It really is.
But it also raises these ethical questions about memory and identity.
Right. If memories are stored in a shared quantum field, what does that mean for our sense of self?
Exactly.
Where does the individual end and the collective begin?
Big question.
Whoa, okay. But before we get too deep into that rabbit hole, let's bring it back to consciousness.
Okay.
We've talked about how quantum singularities might influence bioelectricity and memory. But how does that translate into the subjective experience of being aware, of having a sense of self?
That's the million-dollar question.
I bet.
And honestly, we're still a long way from a definitive answer.
Okay.
But one intriguing idea is that consciousness might emerge from the complex interplay of these quantum processes happening in the brain.
Okay.
Remember those microtubules we talked about?
Yeah, the tiny quantum computers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some researchers believe they might be orchestrating the flow of information and energy in a way that gives rise to conscious awareness.
So it's like this quantum symphony happening inside our brains.
A good way to put it.
That creates the feeling of me.
Right.
Of being a conscious individual.
Yeah. And it's supported by research on brainwave synchronization.
How so?
Scientists have found that when people are engaged in certain tasks or experiencing certain emotions, their brainwave patterns become more coherent.
More synchronized.
More synchronized, exactly. And some argue that this increased coherence might be a signature of quantum processes at work.
Interesting.
Allowing for a more unified and integrated experience of consciousness.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces might fit together.
Yeah.
Quantum singularities influencing bioelectricity, biophotons, creating a quantum information field for memory.
Right.
And microtubules acting as quantum computers to orchestrate consciousness.
It's a lot.
It's a wild and complex picture.
Yeah.
But it's incredibly fascinating.
Absolutely.
It really is.
And it challenges us to think beyond those traditional materialistic models of the brain and the mind. If these quantum processes are really at play, it suggests that we might be more than just biological machines.
Okay.
We might be tapping into this deeper level of reality, a realm of interconnectedness and potential that we're only just beginning to understand.
But if our consciousness is truly influenced by these quantum processes, shouldn't we see more evidence of non-locality in everyday life?
It's a good point.
I mean, shouldn't we be experiencing those quantum leaps in thinking or feeling all the time?
Right.
Instead, it seems like our consciousness is pretty much confined to our individual brains.
That's one of the ongoing debates in this field.
Okay.
Some researchers believe that the quantum effects in the brain are too subtle or short-lived to have a noticeable impact on our daily experience.
Right.
Others argue that we might be experiencing these non-local effects all the time, but we simply haven't developed the tools or the awareness to recognize them.
So it's possible that our intuitions, those gut feelings or sudden insights that seem to come out of nowhere, might actually be glimpses
potentially
into this deeper quantum reality.
It's a possibility worth exploring.
Okay.
And some researchers are even investigating whether practices like meditation or mindfulness might enhance our ability to access these non-local states of consciousness.
Interesting.
They believe that by quieting the mind and reducing distractions, we might be able to tune in to these subtle quantum signals and experience a greater sense of interconnectedness.
So instead of our minds being like isolated islands, they might be more like interconnected nodes.
Exactly.
In a vast quantum network. Constantly exchanging information and energy.
That's the idea.
That raises a whole bunch of questions about the nature of reality, the limits of our perception, and the potential for human consciousness.
Big questions.
Big questions. Yeah. But I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Right.
Let's dive into some of the specific experimental predictions that could help us test these theories and maybe shed more light on these profound mysteries.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So we've explored this mind-blowing idea that quantum singularities could be influencing everything from our cells to our consciousness. We've talked about bioelectricity, biophotons, microtubules acting as quantum computers.
It's wild.
It's a lot to absorb.
It is.
But let's get practical for a moment. What kind of experiments could actually test these theories?
Well, there are some truly fascinating avenues being explored.
Okay, like what?
One area focuses on biophoton emissions from the brain.
Okay.
Researchers are looking for patterns in these emissions that correlate with specific mental states. Like memory recall or problem solving.
So like trying to decipher the language of light?
Kind of,
within the brain?
Exactly.
What else?
Another exciting area is the study of brainwave entrainment. This involves exposing the brain to specific frequencies of light or sound and observing how brainwave patterns respond. Researchers are finding that certain frequencies can induce highly coherent brain states.
Interesting.
Similar to those observed during deep meditation. The thinking is that if consciousness does arise from these coherent quantum processes, then inducing such states artificially could give us insights into how consciousness works.
That's incredible.
It is pretty amazing.
It's like we're trying to tune the brain to the right frequency to unlock these hidden quantum capabilities. But these experiments all sound super complex.
Sure.
Are there like simpler ways to test these ideas?
Well, some researchers are looking at more everyday phenomena, like intuition. They're conducting experiments to see if people can unconsciously pick up on information that's not accessible through normal sensory channels.
Interesting.
For example, they might show participants a series of images, some of which are associated with emotional charged events, and measure their physiological responses. If people consistently react more strongly to the emotionally charged images, even without consciously knowing why, it could suggest a form of non-local perception.
Interesting.
Perhaps facilitated by these quantum networks.
So our gut feelings might actually be tapping into this deeper layer of reality.
It's possible.
But, you know, if these ideas are even remotely true, what does it mean for our everyday lives? Does understanding quantum singularities really change how we live and interact with the world?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's one thing to talk about these mind-blowing theories. But how do we actually integrate this knowledge into our experience? Yeah. I think it starts with a shift in perspective, recognizing that we might be more than just our physical bodies, more than just isolated individuals.
So acknowledging that there might be this deeper level of connection.
Exactly.
This underlying web of quantum singularities that binds us all together.
Right.
But does simply believing that change anything?
It can.
How so?
Think about the placebo effect. Simply believing that a treatment will work can have a real impact on our health.
Right.
Similarly, if we start to view ourselves and the world around us through the lens of interconnectedness, it might subtly shift our behavior. We might be more empathetic, more compassionate, more in tune with the needs of others.
It's like that saying, what you believe you become.
Exactly.
But beyond individual changes, are there broader societal implications?
Absolutely. Like what? Imagine a world where our education system emphasized interconnectedness rather than competition, where our economic systems prioritized cooperation and sustainability over individual gain, where our political systems were based on dialogue and understanding rather than division and conflict.
It sounds idealistic.
It does.
But if we truly understood the implications of this quantum perspective, wouldn't those be natural outcomes?
I think so. But it's not about forcing any particular ideology or belief system. It's about cultivating a sense of curiosity, of open-mindedness, of willingness to explore new ways of understanding ourselves and the universe.
So this deep dive isn't just about mind-bending science.
Right.
It's about expanding our awareness.
Yeah.
Challenging our assumptions, and ultimately asking ourselves what it means to be human.
Right.
In a universe that might be far more interconnected
than
we ever imagined.
Well said.